Welcome to day 2 of SFF 2021 and the collaboration stage of the event, where we bring you content that's focused on more audience interaction. So to kick off today's session, we have the first of 4 panel discussions. This panel will be a high-level discussion about Web 3.0 components and how they'll shape the future of your online activities. So joining us on the panel are Emin, who is a Chief Executive Officer of Ava Labs, Vincent Young, co-founder and Chief Executive Officer of Firework, Telemedia Cloud's Chief Executive Officer Peter Wright, and Brenda Harvey, General Manager for IBM APAC. Also, Divyesh Vithlani, who is Accenture's Senior Managing Director and Market Unit Lead for Southeast Asia. Moderating this panel is Ullrich Loeffler, who is Chief Operating Officer of Ecosystem. And this session will allow questions from attendees on Slido. We'll now join Ullrich and the panel of speakers.
Yes, thank you, Manisha, and welcome everyone for joining us for this Global Leaders panel on the building blocks of Web 3.0. I'm very excited to be joined by an amazing panel locally here in Singapore as well as internationally from East Coast and West Coast US. Some true experts to discuss for the next 40 minutes the building blocks of Web 3.0. We also want to talk maybe about some of the socioeconomic implications of Web 3.0, as well as maybe some of the limitations and the controversy around it. And we also want to answer your questions, so if you've got anything, don't lean back too far and throw through your questions through the Slido app on your SFF app. So let's not waste any time. I want to kick it off with Brenda. Look, IBM has a long history, obviously, of being one of the most innovative company in history. I think 28 years of consecutive years of being the US company with the most patents being registered. What does Web 3.0 mean to you, and what do you think triggered Web 3.0 to come up now?
Well, this is a really exciting technology, and IBM has been involved in this for the last 20 years on the journey to Web 3.0. And we think of Web 3.0 really as the third generation of internet services that is driving new capability for websites and applications. And it is based on machine understanding of data. So content and applications from large centralized platforms now are being decentralized. They're being connected and highly open to derive more value with agents, intelligent agents that are connected across every IP set. And so when we think about Web 3.0, there are 2 core technologies at the base, AI and blockchain for distributed ledger. And this is allowing Web 3.0 to be smarter, to be spatial, and to be seamless for new user personal interactions and experiences. But to make Web 3.0 ubiquitous is really about ensuring an open, hybrid, secure cloud and using IoT and 5G. And for the reasons I think this has become such a trigger of growth, I think are 3 areas. First, users are demanding privacy of their data, trust and transparency in all products and processes and solutions they use. Second, through COVID, barriers to digital adoption have just been evaporated. So users are expecting a digital-first experience. And then third, which I think is the greatest, is this really incredible ecosystem of VC companies, of tech, of software, of consulting and services, and government agencies and regulatory like MAS, really coming together to advance innovation in this area.
Right. No, thank you. And I want to maybe pass it on, Divyesh.
I would echo some of what Brenda said in terms of what has really triggered this sudden acceleration. And based on research that we've done, pre-COVID, the leaders in technology were already growing at 2x of the laggards. And what we've seen in a recent updated version of that research is that leaders are actually growing at 5x of the laggards. And the leaders have really accelerated their adoption from Web 2.0 to Web 3.0 because they've realized the power of technology to drive forward their businesses.
So we heard already like quite a few different topics. We heard blockchain, we heard AI, we heard obviously security, and we heard all the services around it. So is there one killer technology or like killer building block which is basically enabling Web 3.0, or is it really the perfect storm of different technologies coming together to enable now to move to Web 3.0? Or maybe Peter.
Yeah, well, no, I don't think it is any one particular killer technology. I think it's a whole pile of technologies coming together, and I suppose the way I would look at it is really in 3 tiers. I think you look at the interaction layer, I suppose, and you think about Web 1.0, we were interacting with a browser. Web 2.0, we went to mobile devices with the helping user-generated content. And now with Web 3.0, it's just a whole proliferation of devices to help sensing the physical world. Could be glasses, could be any form of IoT device, could be robots, could be autonomous vehicles. These are all things that can actually help us make more sense of the world. So we're seeing the AR and VR technologies at this interaction layer as one element. You've then got to, if you're then using those technologies and you're getting all of this new information that can help drive more contextual, better human experiences, you've got to then do something with all the compute. You've got to make decisions around that. So how do you do that? So you've got the computing power that you need that has to move to the edge, which is then you've got the 5G to be able to manage the latency, and then you've got AI, because how are you going to make decisions in real time with all of that information? And then finally, I think the third layer is that information capture layer. You've now got all this information. What do you do with it? And so you've got to be able to manage the privacy of that information, the transparency. This is where blockchain comes in. And all the privacy, the transparency, the immutability of blockchain. I think you can't have Web 3.0 without all of these technologies working together.
Yeah, and I would add then, putting all that together, when I think of killer apps, of course, we're here from a FinTech perspective, and we're all used to global banking and payments, and making life really much easier from that perspective. But I'll say the killer app now using all of that is all related to COVID and a digital health pass, and being able to take personal private data of your vaccination, being able to have that across travel and venues and countries and cities, and seeing this kind of be a killer app for the foreseeable future for us. Yeah. Leveraged on blockchain, of course.
Rather than killer app, I would sort of echo what Vitalik said this morning at one of the sessions. It's the killer ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's really the collaboration between Web 2.0, Web 3.0.
Yeah.
And what's really important is, as we predicted a couple of years ago, that the blockchain will form the next basis of the internet, is that those two communities, the big tech plus the ecosystem, really come together to drive innovation, to drive inclusion, which I know we'll cover later.
I wanted to bring Emin and Vincent into the conversation as well. We talked about blockchain, obviously, coming through as the connecting layer across the different technologies or different participants in Web 3.0. Emin, obviously, Ava Labs and Avalanche are, at the forefront of, the blockchain evolution. So, what is your view on, the kind of killer technology to make or to bring Web 3.0 to life?
So thank you, Ullrich. So I think I have a very different take on Web 3. So I don't think Web 3 is defined by IoT. I don't think it's defined by 5G. I don't think it's defined by any of the things that have been mentioned, or AI. None of these things are specifically Web 3 at all. You could easily build client-server services that take inputs from IoT, from 5G, etc. We already do. That's the old school thinking. So if you're still stuck in that mindset, then you will forever miss the boat on what Web3 is all about. Web3 is defined by a different architecture. That architecture is a peer-to-peer architecture. Yeah. The defining characteristic, which we didn't hear in these keywords, is getting missed out upon. That architecture is one where the user is in charge of their data, where the service is provided not by a single entity, but by a number of multiple entities, none of which is fully in charge. And the way the service is provided is resilient to misbehavior by any of the multiple parties that provide the service. That's my definition. It's a positive definition. It's a testable definition. If you take a solution from some big web firm who's in the business of building a panopticon, collecting your data, packaging it, and unbeknownst to you, selling it like they did for Cambridge Analytica, and unbeknownst to you, violating your OILAs, that is the old school thinking. And if you add all these IoT, et cetera, to that, then you're going to end up with a toxic mix. So what Web3 is all about is prohibiting the service provider from engaging in those kinds of activities. The enabling thing here, this central thing here, it's not an after the fact, oh, it's one of the 15 things that are in our list of buzzwords kind of a thing. The enabling central thing here is the blockchain. For that is the technology that makes sure that these participants do not misbehave. And the key killer app is very, very simple. We did not until recently have blockchains that scaled. None of the blockchains that we had are anywhere near production quality. They've always, until very recently, they were essentially proof of concept level, very low latency, very high latency, very low throughput systems. And changing that was the biggest enabler for Web3.
Thank you, Emin. And we're coming to the limitations a little bit later as well in more detail, but I wanted to ask Vincent as well. Firework, you're specialized on short video, platforms, and I think you're reaching 250 million users, worldwide. The main application of your business, is this on Web 3.0 or is it Web 2.0, and where do you see the main, transition of companies at the moment?
Yes, thank you, Rich. So what we are seeing is we definitely build based on a foundation of Web 3.0, which our definition is it's more decentralized. It's more the customer owning the data, et cetera. So I want to give an example. What you think about 2.0 is more company like centralized water garden, right? Everyone consumes in one place, like Amazon, for example, like Facebook. Those are the places where it's a mega, centralized places. But now things are already happening a little bit. So let's take Shopify, for example. Shopify is decentralized. Shopify powers millions of websites. They're turning millions of websites to become millions of Amazon, right? Things doesn't need to be centralized. So what Firework does is basically turning all the social medias. It doesn't, every time when we think about social media, it doesn't need to live inside of 4 apps. What we are trying to do is very similar how Shopify is doing, decentralize everything. Every single website, everyone, when they think about, oh, I love the short video format, I love the live stream format, I want to become a TikTok. Can I? Instead of just kind of creating an account on a centralized place, you yourself, the website itself can, become a TikTok, can become a social media, right? To own the data, to own the consumer experience. And, that's kind of what we are seeing is about the world moving more towards a decentralized place, and website play a significant role inside of it. While we all think, oh, the future must be inside of an Instagram, a TikTok, but we didn't realize is one data point. There are 350 million live websites in the world. Website by nature was decentralized, right? And last year we added another 50 million website. Again, so what happened to that? How do we change that experience? By powering the website using all kinds of technologies, I think is the way to power the future of Web 3.0.
So if we're saying, okay, the killer technology or killer app is, the architecture and the decentralized model of Web 3.0. And we know that Web 2.0, it was kind of the winner takes it all, the biggest company basically, owned the biggest share, of the internet or of the web. How do you think this is transitioning from a basically value redistribution, from the big incumbents to the new ones? And what does it mean for the normal person just participating? Will I become a shareholder in Web 3.0 and do I make a living out of it?
So if I may jump in here, yeah, absolutely. I think one of the main things that we are working at with the Web3 revolution is an entirely different set of business models. The old business model for the web was simple. You collect data, you build a panopticon, you sell that advertising data, you make money in the middle. And what's changing now is that there's a myriad of different business models, all revolving around tokens and token management that enable the content creators to take a first-hand role in that entire process of value generation. And that's a very, very rich process. And it's very different from DeFi application to DeFi application. It's an entirely different value proposition. Each and every one of them is unique. And it's such an exciting time. It's like the Cambrian explosion of business models. And in all of them, the central defining characteristic is that the users, the content creators, are one with the system. They participate actively. They get rewarded to the extent that they benefit the system as a whole.
I maybe want to then pass the question over to maybe Brenda, Divyesh, and Peter. We talked about the building blocks for the Web 3.0 to function in itself, but what do corporations need to do to basically play in the Web 3.0 arena? Like, are they ready? And how do they need to transition to basically be ready, or to take part in this game?
Yeah, sure. So I think first, and we've talked about it a lot, is the processes that they have. Understanding how they work today. Are they infused with AI and workflow? And are they connected to deliver a better service, a new business model? At the core of the processes is data. And of course, data core to any application, and creating a data fabric and where that data is coming from. In many companies today, only 20% of the data in their enterprise is being used because the majority is unstructured. Or in new business models, if they're working with insurance, with healthcare, that data is coming from IoT or other devices. How do you incorporate that data in a data fabric? Of course, within trust and privacy and transparency. And then the third piece is really pulling together the processes, the business model, and that data into an open hybrid cloud platform, and understanding how do you integrate maybe core applications on-prem, legacy to new, to FinTech, to creating a whole new approach to delivering a service to a client, or to their end users, or to get into a whole new area themselves, whether that's with tokens or other capabilities now available. And I think this also is the ecosystem part of having an open hybrid cloud. And we've worked with many, many fintechs that are here and other partners, such as Thought Machine or Temenos, where we're working with getting that data from legacy banks, and the banks are working with us with these new fintech, whether it's in Know Your Client or in payments or in wealth management or whatever that is, pulling that together to make that a new offering, seamless experience with your client. So back to your processes, infusing data and AI together, automation, AI-empowered automation, natural language processing capabilities, and ensuring you have an open hybrid cloud. And I think what we're seeing is, instead of just looking at one cloud as a solution, hybrid cloud is unlocking more value, over 2.5x the value as we work with enterprise clients on their journey.
So Ullrich, I have a slightly different take to that. I think a lot of what you said is completely spot on. However, if I can tell by my age, right? I lived through Web 1.0, 2.0, and corporations, I remember going through an era 10 years ago where we had to define a social media policy, right, under Web 2.0. So I think under Web 3.0, there's going to be a ton of policy and culture aspects that corporations are going to have to deal with. I think data that we've talked about before is not so much about data governance and how you unlock the value of data. I think it's really accepting that you don't own your customer's data. The customer owns the data. And the sovereignty belongs to the customer, not to you. So kind of just accept that fact and focus on developing products and services that will draw your customers to you rather than holding their data at ransom, right? So the whole data sovereignty, I think, needs to be completely thought through differently in Web 3.0. Building on that stack, I think they also need to define policies around NFT marketplaces. So each corporation will have to have a clear view, like we did in Web 2.0 around what's your social media policy. You'll need to have an NFT policy, right? Yep. What do you deal with that? And finally, I think as we kind of build up the stack, you'll need to have a VR policy as well. I mean, I read a quote from one of the companies that, if companies don't have a clear and coherent VR policy, then they're going to be, sort of outcompeted from a marketplace standpoint.
Yeah. Just from a really pragmatic perspective, where I'm seeing the business opportunities today, the things that we're working on with enterprise, I think fall into two areas. One is where there's a fundamental problem of trust that needs to be solved, and there's no framework to do that. And I think we're working on governments trusting vaccine verification and efficacy. So I think that's one example. And the other is around the test of the intermediary. And does the intermediary add value or do they not? I think that's where businesses are at today. I don't think that is the total future of Web 3.0. I just think that's fundamentally where most businesses are at today in terms of their maturity in dealing with this. Yeah.
I wanted to pass this good transition over to Vincent. You mentioned as well, there's so many websites out there, and obviously each business or each website is trying to attract users. And we talked about the users now take control of the data and the privacy again. But do corporations also need to take responsibility of their web presence again, rather than using the big aggregators like Google or Facebook, you name it, to attract the users, to basically get them back to their site and have a direct relationship with them?
Yes. So what I'm seeing, at least in the US, more and more websites, the big ones, are really trying to build their D2C effort, which is direct to consumer. So for example, take a look at ESPNs. So in the past, they push a lot of content onto social, right? But these days, starting from 2 years ago, they're actually building their own version of TikTok directly inside of their apps. They're like, hey, if you want to watch the short video, this new format, come to my own website. You don't need to go into a centralized places. I have a lot of content here, right? This is very similar to Disney Plus. So this is happening a lot to the media company. More and more media company are trying to not just join force inside of a walled garden. That's the Web 2.0. All of the media company now trying to see, how do I become a walled garden? How do I attract more and more people coming to the website, coming to our website, coming to the app? So that's what we see. Similarly, for the transactional, for the e-commerce, right? 40% of the product, they're not sold on Amazon. They're not sold inside of a walled garden. They're sold only on their own website. Look at Warby Parker. Look at all of those new age D2C website, right? It's not joining an aggregator. If you want to buy the product, you only go to the website. So this trend, what we've seen started just 2 years ago, now has been more and more popular, right? There are so many technology provider just helping them to build a better web presence, to turning themselves into a walled garden. I feel like that's a very interesting trend going forward for the Web 3.0, like decentralization. Everybody is the node, the power of the mega apps is actually going to decrease a lot more.
Yeah. And that would also require like a culture shift, but also probably a skills and education shift, because marketing teams are geared up for SOE and basically attracting customers through some of these mega apps. Now they've got to turn around again and actually attract them themselves. So how ready do you think the business or the talent is to really succeed in the Web 3.0? And do you see education maybe already, like some of the educational institutions keeping up with the trend and actually retraining our workforce from tomorrow?
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of learning to do. You see, recently I saw a dating business, and here it is. It's a dating business that says we're doing everything. That their marketing is we're a Web.3 company. We're solving the issue of trust. Fake profiles. Can we define our authentic? Can we publish a profile that you can verify as authentic, et cetera, et cetera? But I think, there's just, in my mind, there's fundamentally a problem with that particular use case, because you're working in a trustless environment. That's the basis of blockchain. And yet, in a dating context, you actually want to build trust over time. But the whole system keeps you in a trustless environment. And so what they're promoting is, once you've matched a profile and it's your authentic self, we'll use AI to help you with dating tips and how things are set up. So I'm not quite sure if that's your authentic self or if that's the AI channeled through you. And then from there, guess what? You can publish a smart contract around the things that you're going to do for each other. And that can help in dispute resolution. I'm not so sure that that's the case. So, I think that's not a good example, but I think it's ways that people are trying to learn and understand, and there's going to be failures along the way, for sure. There's other good examples as well. one example that we're working with is, we've got a situation with workers coming from more disadvantaged economies, coming over and working, say, in Singapore as an example. One of the challenges there is for say Singapore, who do I know who's coming into the country? How do I know that this person is this person? On the other side, we've got people that actually, not even in a web context, but in a real physical context, actually don't even have a street address. Yep. They actually don't have a real, their identity is just defined in their family circle. It's very difficult. They can't get a loan. They can't do anything. And so with this solution that we're working on, we're providing identities to individuals. Yep. They have a verified income stream now, and they're now being offered microloans of up to $2,000, which can be transformational and change their families. So this is an example of self-sovereign identity. They own their identity, but it works for them, and it works for the business as well. So two different examples.
So for the market becoming more inclusive. So
yeah, I would just pick up on that point that Peter made, right, and Vincent. I think for me, the most exciting part of Web 3.0 is the SSI, the self-sovereign identity, that you own your identity. You're defined by your digital identity, not by your physical, whether it's your ethnic or gender or where you came from. And that's the most exciting part of Web 3.0. And translating that into kind of reality and sort of potential, how do we make sure that the data can travel with the customer, that they drive a fully inclusive behavior in terms of giving them access to finance, giving them access to education that they perhaps didn't have in the centralized world?
I guess I would add the excitement for me, just in one point, I think it actually is demonstrated by this panel, is that Web 3.0 is open to everyone, and the barriers of technology, it doesn't have to be an IBM or an Accenture doing this, but startups, tech, we're starting younger and younger, right, with schools and education and STEM. And what we also learned through COVID is that we have to stop the digital divide, and Web 3.0 is going to help that. Of course, we still need government capabilities to drive broadband and internet access and data capabilities over the internet to many, many places, and 5G will be coming. But this allows the barriers for anyone with ideas about new business models, about tokenization of things, about creativity, spatial, physical, digital coming together. So it's very exciting, and this will just continue to accelerate the value and the innovation in 3.0.
Emin, you wanted to add to that as well?
Yeah, I wanted to chime in with a couple of Web3 applications, and I wanted to bifurcate some of these applications into two sets. So there is a great tendency to think that Web3 is just going to be exactly like Web2, except maybe it's decentralized, except maybe we get rid of Mark Zuckerberg, but we maintain Facebook. Maybe it'll be like that. There are many people trying to do that. There have already been many efforts to take
I think we lost your sound. Yeah, yes, we're still off sound, so we might. I think the guys are working on that. So maybe one question to Vincent in between. You mentioned the world is becoming more decentralized. That is referring to the digital world, or would you see that in the physical world as well? Or do they run in parallel, or are there potentially some different trends that will clash at some stage? I think we lost your audio as well. Okay, so
I mean,
maybe
I'll pick up a couple of examples, right, where I think I've certainly read about this, but it's more about my hope and imagination perhaps than reality. So if you take education, for instance, right, and how can you sort of provide a level of experience to somebody who's growing up in my sort of country where I was born in Tanzania, having access to the level of education without leaving their village, right, to somebody in the Western world,
Perhaps
right, through the combination of the technologies that make up the Web 3.0 stack. So decentralizing the content, right, providing that immersive experience through extended reality, where you can literally learn how to be a neurosurgeon sitting in your own village without having to leave your town, and basically have access to the same type and quality of education that kids in the Western world are having, right? That for me would be super exciting, and that's where I think technologies like 5G, IoT, whilst they don't need to be in the 3.0 space, I think they complement and add to the foundation of 3.0.
I think the sound is back on again. I wanted to, Emin, obviously you wanted to add to that. Also wanted to, maybe you can spend a couple of minutes as well. You mentioned before on some of the projects that are failing, and we talked a lot about the hype and the opportunity of Web 3.0, but what are you seeing out there? Like, if you had to give it a school grade, what would it be, for the efforts so far? Can you hear us? Vincent, can you hear us? Okay, then maybe back to a question here. We talked about the security as well, and obviously trust is a key component as well. And we talked about the young talent coming out, starting earlier and earlier to innovate, and maybe starting their new companies and innovating. But my dad is turning 78 next year, and will he be part of Web 3.0, or will he get the trust? Where he's just about trusting to get a credit card and do online transactions. So, do you think there will be not a digital divide, but maybe an age divide, of people jumping on board or being left behind?
I would say absolutely yes. Right? In fact, I mean, I've been sort of immersing myself in Web 3.0 of late and looking at sort of buying up bits of land on Decentraland and sort of creating avatars and sort of buying NFTs and stuff like that. And when I sort of talk about this to my kids who are Gen Z, they're like thinking, wow, this is like the new world. So I think absolutely your dad should absolutely be able to participate in Web 3.0, whether it's gaming, whether it's commerce, whether it's looking at different sort of marketplaces, NFTs, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, this digital divide, really important, but through COVID, in studies that we did, and especially here in Asia, 18 new user IDs on average were created by every person in Asia. Yep. And it was maybe it was for home, health, work, connectivity, gaming, other things. So this, of course, increases not only access and digital capability and understanding, but it also increases cybersecurity vectors and attack spaces. So there's a lot of responsibility now for many of the organizations, enterprises who are creating these digital services to also ensure that there is cyber and protection of the applications, the passwords, and all of that. But the adoption will come from the need. And look what happened. People said, I need to get this, I need to have it delivered, and they opened up these, many of these connections to applications they never would have entered or looked at before.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think the sound is. Emin and Vincent, can you hear us again?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Hey.
Perfect, because I just want to go back to Emin. You were just talking about your views and also maybe highlighting some of the limitations of the current efforts that you're seeing.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly make the point that that a very common pitfall is to think that Web 3 is exactly going to be like Web 2, maybe perhaps slightly more decentralized. That would be a better thing to do, perhaps. But there is a bigger game being played, and there are many different kinds of already hugely successful Web3 applications. They have to do with decentralization of finance, what we call DeFi. And these primitives look nothing like the primitives on Wall Street. So if we'd had somebody from Wall Street talk about Wall Street 2.0 versus Wall Street 3.0, they would probably sound a little like what we heard earlier today. And they would probably sound, they would talk about how loans work and so on. And in comes the magic of blockchain technologies, in comes scalable blockchains like Avalanche, and suddenly you have things like flash loans, where somebody can take literally $500 million. We're not talking about taking somebody without an ID and giving them a microloan. We're talking about taking somebody with no ID, giving them $500 million, allowing them to do arbitrage and return the money with a service fee. And if they can't, well, then the system is capable of undoing the entire operation so they can't run away and abscond with the funds. But the magic of this new technology is it enables entirely new things that Wall Street was unable to do. And the great success stories lie currently in DeFi. The Web3 use cases, they're wonderful. Maybe they're going to be here in 5 to 10 years, in my view. And a lot of it is going to be misstarts, people trying to copy what we had into a new domain. But if I have learned anything at all from having built one of the big blockchains in the last year, and the main thing is that you have to adopt the technology and you have to actually take advantage of its unique features. And the unique feature is programmability of the underlying fabric, which allows trustless transactions. So not these promissory notes, not dating with a smart contract, but doing something entirely different that we didn't know how to do before. How to give somebody $500 million in a way that they can't abscond with it. Yeah. So that's, I think, going to be the very exciting cases ahead of us.
Vincent, anything you want to add? Because obviously you're working with a lot of companies, as Firework. Do you see any kind of really new use cases that maybe are not transitioned from Web 2.0 to 3.0?
Yeah, so one example is in the US, there's a very big grocery retailer called Albertsons Safeway. So this is the place where everybody go shopping. So in the Web 2.0 days, what they realized that they rely a lot about social, right? Yeah. Putting a lot of the food recipe content on Pinterest and on TikTok, and then they go to shop in their places. But on the Web 3.0 days, what they did is they just implemented Firework. They basically turned their entire website into a Pinterest themselves. Now they're talking to all of their consumers to say, hey, you want to see the short video, you want to see the live stream, come to my site. You don't need to go to a big social media. We carry a lot of the function there, right? You can consume wonderful content, watch short video, watch live stream, interact with us, and do purchase everything on www.safeway.com. So that's something that's unheard of before. Now it's something that's become much more interesting.
Thank you.
I mean, I would just add one of the challenges I see is the user experience, right? Yeah. I mean, if anyone's tried it, we can't all be as proficient to sort of bag NFTs on Discord and brag about them on Twitter, right? I mean, it requires a level of proficiency that perhaps will change over time. So the user experience needs to change. It needs to look more like some of the Web 2.0 applications from an interface standpoint.
Yep. We are almost running out of time, so I just wanted to thank you all, for participating. Thanks for joining, especially for Emin and Vincent. I know it's pretty late where you are. Just maybe to summarize, I think what I really take away is it's not really about the technology, and it usually never is. It's really about the the applications and how it's been put into practice to create value and create user experience, and the fact that maybe the decentralized architecture is really the killer technology or building block and to enable it. But I think it's also clear that we are still a long way to go. It's still evolving. So I think we will learn a lot, and it will be interesting to see how this conversation is playing out over the next few years when we are meeting again at SFF 2022 and beyond. So thank you very much. Thanks for watching, and enjoy the rest of SFF 2021.
And thank you, Ullrich, and to all of the speakers for sharing with us what technologies Web 3.0 needs to succeed, and some really great case studies there to dig into too.